All right, it's 1 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, and thanks for joining us on this beautiful fall day with some summer-like weather, which is kind of nice to have an extension of summer. Appreciate everybody joining us this afternoon. Welcome to our supported decision-making training series. Next slide.
All right, just a bit of housekeeping here. So this training has been approved for 1 social work CEU. So if you're in need of that CEU, you'll have to stay in the training the entirety of the time. If you're 5 minutes or more late, you forfeit your CEUs for the entire training. And to get that CEU, I'll send out an evaluation at the end of the training via the chat. And if you're looking for the chat, if you look across the top bar of your Teams, you'll see a little bubble with some lines through it. That's how you pop out the chat. Similarly, if you're, you want to raise your hand to ask a question, there's a little smiley face with a hand next to that. That's where you can raise your hand. And if you're looking for closed captions, you can also click on the little 3 dots that says more actions to turn on captions there. And then I did want to let everyone know that this session is being recorded and will be available on OCHN's website at a later date. And that wraps up our housekeeping for today.
So welcome and thank you for attending our training session. I think you're going to find the topic very interesting and informative. I want to thank our partners in our supported decision-making training series. Certainly Mary, who's one of our presenters today from the Development Disabilities Council, has been instrumental in helping us develop this 10-month training series, which began in January and will conclude in October. Also, I wanted to say appreciation to Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network, who also is helping us get the word out and sharing the training flyers and information with their stakeholders as well. This is one of the OCHN's goals, is to really make sure that folks have an understanding about supported decision making. We do have a work group that I lead, and one of their goals for this past year was to make sure that we are providing education about supported decision making. They felt it was important that individuals know what is available to support people to live the most independent life possible, to have the support they need to also live that life as independent as possible. Mary and I are also part of a statewide work group that is working on supported decision making, and we're also part of a subcommittee that's working on a toolkit. So eventually, probably in 2022, we'll actually have a toolkit with a bunch of supported decision-making tools and resources available to support people and helping them make the decision, help them understand what those various tools will be. So we're very excited about that and looking forward to sharing with that folks next year. Next slide.
Okay, so Rachel, you're up. Oh, I'm sorry.
Let me do a little welcome. I want to welcome our 2 presenters today. Our topic is supporting and teaching about healthy relationships. We have Rachel Garuda, who is a peer educator, who will present with Mary Sheehan-Bogard, who is the Community Inclusion Coordinator for the Development Disabilities Council. We really appreciate that they're here to share with us today. So I'm going to give you a virtual applause. Yay! Thanks for joining us. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, so Rachel's going to start us out. Go ahead, Rachel.
Hi, my name is Rachel Garuda, and I'm a peer educator. And I did, I was one of the people who trained to be a peer educator. I Mary, and I'm still learning how to be an educator, but I think that I'm doing a good job. But
okay. Well, I will resonate that as well, Rachel. I think you're doing an amazing job. This will be Rachel's, I think, 2nd presentation that she's done with me. She is not located in the Oakland County area. She works out of La Casa, which is in Livingston County. And she went through the series of trainings that La Casa was providing and identified herself as somebody who was interested in becoming a peer educator on this topic. And then I am Mary Shambogard, and again, I work for the Michigan Developmental Disabilities Council. So I come to this topic with about 40 years, I hate to say that many years, of training as a sexuality educator. It's something that I did early on in my career. My career began as a psychologist and working in case management at CMHs. I've worked at several CMHs around the state. But I became a qualified sexuality educator those about 40 years ago when I was employed in Allegan County. And then just started working with the council in 2017. And we'll talk about how the council's initiative got started and how that connects with supported decision making and that issue of alternatives to guardianship as we move along in the presentation. So we'll go ahead to the next slide, please. So you might be asking yourself, why is it important to teach about sexuality and what does it have to do with this topic of supported decision making and guardianship? I will tell you it has a lot to do with it, and this first portion of the presentation is going to be helping you to understand why it's so important. Sexuality is part of the natural human experience, and so we have to talk about it when we're thinking about helping people and supporting people with disabilities in the decisions that they make. So if we don't provide education, what I saw a lot as a psychologist is people being referred to me as quote unquote behavior problems. When in fact, you know, upon further investigation, what I was seeing was people were experiencing trauma related to previous abuse. They were individuals who were questioning their sexuality or people seeking information about sexuality in the only way they knew how. So having education helps empower people and it helps keep people safe and prevent some situations from ending up in the legal system. What about you, Rachel?
I think it's important to teach people with disabilities about sexuality, because all people who have disabilities are sexual human beings, and they have a right to learn what about their sexuality as much as a regular person would. So that's why I think it's important to teach about sexuality.
All right. So Rachel is the most recent peer educator. We had a training this spring, a TOT training, and so she was part of that cohort. So since early this year, you've been working with us on this project, right?
Yeah.
Okay, next slide, please. So people with disabilities sexuality intersects with so many aspects of their life. Intersects with race, nationality, religion, gender expression, disability type, marital status. There's all of these intersections, so we can't really look at supporting decisions that a person makes without looking at this as a life domain, sexuality and relationships. So as you see from the graphic, if you click on the slide, the graphic should come up, Caitlin. There we go. So you see all of these intersections. And again, as Rachel pointed out, regardless of whether a person has a disability or not, they're a sexual human being. If you're a living, breathing human being, you're a sexual human being. If you could click on the graphic one more time, then you see where all of these intersections appear. Sexual orientation, the location of the state that a person's in determines the type of education that's available to them. Ethnicity, different ethnic groups look at the issue of sexuality in different ways. Religion, you see an intersection there where different religious beliefs are impacted by sexuality, and a person's sexuality is impacted by the religion that they follow. Gender identity, even employment. Issues around sexuality intersect there as well. So it affects every aspect of a person's life. Next slide, please. Okay, go ahead, Rachel.
Messages about sexuality starts on the playground. You would be amazed at how early people should start learning about sexuality. When did you first learn about sexuality? What messages were you given?
Okay, so normally when we present in Zoom, we have a whiteboard on the next slide. And we're going to invite you to share your information, your answers to those two questions Rachel just asked in the chat box. And then Caitlin's going to share that. So read the first one again there, Rachel.
When did you first learn about sexuality?
Okay. So while we're giving you a moment to write in the chat box what your experiences were, I will tell you that I started learning about sexuality on the playground very early on. And as you can see, Caitlin, if you're able to click on the bottom area of the slide, you'll see another graphic. And you can click again. You see from these photographs here, people start learning about this very early on. So again, I'm going to give you a few minutes to write in the chat. I will tell you also that my son, who's now 24, got married in preschool. There was a beautiful ceremony, I hear. I wasn't included as the mother of the groom at that time, which is really funny to me because my son's engaged and going to be getting married in September of next year. So I had to tell his fiance that she was going to be his second wife because he was married on the playground. So think about that concept. He was 4 years old and people his age were already thinking about this concept of relationships and bringing people together. And think about what those messages he got on the playground. And as he was telling me about this, he said to me, well, I had to marry Samantha because she told me I had to, right? And I was having one of those mom psychologist moments because I'm thinking, you what? You got married in preschool? And you know, how did this all happen on the playground? And the psychologist in me was thinking about all the messages he received about relationships. You know, him thinking, I have to get married because someone asked me to, right? Not thinking about what he was looking for in a relationship or any of those kind of concepts. And he was getting those messages at 4 years of age. So Caitlin, let's take a moment now and just kind of preview a little bit about what was put in the chat.
Right, so we have a lot of similar comments. So grade school, elementary school, a lot of people mentioned, you know, talking with their friends about boyfriends or crushes in even kindergarten. We have some that say age 5, age 7. And then I thought it was interesting, someone mentioned they were formally taught, you know, in middle school, but of course, you know, friends talking and things like that happened much younger.
Right. So people with disabilities exist in the same world that we exist. So they're getting messages from various sources, friends, peers, the media, all of that, and the messages that are portrayed by those groups can be very different for people with disabilities. Sometimes the messages they receive are just vastly different based on myths and stereotypes that the society as a whole harbors toward people with disabilities and their sexuality. So Rachel, if you would read that second question again, we're going to ask you to write your comments in the back. What were the messages? Do you want to read it or you want me to go ahead, Rachel? Oh, Rachel, I think you're somehow got muted. I'll go ahead and read the question while I give you a chance to unmute. So what were the messages that you got? Were they positive or negative messages about sexuality? Or if you want to tell us kind of a general topic. So I'm going to give you a few moments to write in the chat box. While you're doing that, another peer educator that I present with, Frank, who openly talks about being a member of the LGBTQIA community, talks about really the only message is that as a young man with a disability that he got were, quote unquote, don't touch women. That was the only sex ed he ever received until he became an adult. And as he likes to say, largely I was okay with that idea of never touching women from a very early age. But it was all the information that he then started to receive as an adult kind of made him really question things like, okay, why is it that I'm different? I'm told I'm not supposed to touch women, and if that's the only message that I need to know about sexuality, I'm kind of confused. And so he really had to learn at a much older age. And I could share many stories with you of people that have been referred to me over the years where, because they didn't get anything that's a positive message, or they didn't get any education at an early age, it created a lot of problems for them. So Caitlin, what do we see in the chat box?
So we just have a few comments so far, but some are that boys liking girls and girls liking boys is normal. Someone said, growing up, it always felt like this is something I need to do. Have the boyfriend, have the husband, be married, have kids. Someone said, saving it all for marriage. It was entirely about heterosexual experiences and abstinence. Again, sexual relationships between a man or a male and a female. And you should get married. And another boys liking girls and girls liking boys comment. So pretty similar there, it looks like.
These are real similar to what we hear a lot of times when we're presenting, right, Rachel? Same kind of messages that a lot of people get. And so imagine then if you're a person with a disability and you either didn't get any messages about it, but yet you start to approach puberty and you have these hormones going through your body and you start thinking about things and you see things on the media and you're wondering, why has no one ever told me about this? It really puts people with disabilities at a huge disadvantage. Sometimes then they become adults and they start working in the community, but that they don't have any information about how to interact with their peers and their colleagues at work, and it creates problems. So again, the intersection is many and varied. So I appreciate all of your comments. We're going to move on to the next slide. Okay, so this slide talks about myths and stereotypes that people harbor toward people with disabilities. These are the top 5 that we hear most often when we're doing presentations like this. That people with disabilities are childlike, sex is not for children, it's for adults, so they don't need to hear about it. So again, if we harbor this myth and stereotypes, it works against people with disabilities. Number 2 is that people with disabilities are over-sexual. That's all they think about all the time. And that's so not true. We have many people with disabilities throughout our state and throughout our nation and throughout the world that kind of break all these stereotypes on a daily basis. Third is that they're asexual. They never think about it. It's not, they're not sexual human beings somehow because they have a disability. I mean, anybody can look at Maslow's hierarchy and see that sexuality is part of every level of Maslow's hierarchy. And it's so important, and it's a natural part of the human experience. Number 4 is that there's no ability to give consent, and that's untrue as well. Just like anyone else, we need to be educated to make educated decisions. We need to be taught what is a healthy relationship and what isn't a healthy relationship in order to make decisions that make sense in our lives. If understanding relationships and the difference between healthy and unhealthy relationships was easy, we wouldn't have the divorce rate that we do in the United States. So this isn't any easier or any harder for people with disabilities. Relationships are difficult, and people with disabilities need the education, but they need the education provided in a way that makes sense to them. And we would argue as educators that it is parents' responsibility, and if a person has a guardian, it's their responsibility to make sure they get the education rather than deny them the education. Number 5, in terms of myths and stereotypes, is that people are incapable of understanding, and that's untrue as well. If you'd click on the photographs there for a moment, Caitlin, you see we have people with disabilities that are in same-sex couples and having great, healthy relationships. Okay, not clicking. We'll just go on to the next slide then. We had some other graphics that also show people with disabilities are in interracial relationships at times. There are relationships where one partner has a disability and the other does not. So again, people with disabilities are breaking these stereotypes and breaking these myths each and every day. So this slide, go ahead, Rachel. You're on mute. You'll need to unmute.
The difference between sex and sexuality. What is sexuality?
Okay, so we're going to do a little activity here. If you think of us as sex educators, your mind goes to one set of letters that make up three little letters that make up one word, sex. And it's a private concept in the American culture. So oftentimes when we teach, we talk about it's okay to giggle through this because we'll say some things that seem funny because we're talking about it in a public arena and it's a topic that's considered very private. So people think of that, just sex, but sexuality, we're not sex educators, we're sexuality educators, is a much bigger topic. So Rachel's nicer than I am, so she'll give you that first one that goes in that circle. We're asking you the question, what else other than sex? So she'll give you the sex, so we could write that if we were doing a whiteboard, we'd write the circle and we'd say inside that circle is sex, but what other things make up sexuality, that much bigger topic? And we'll just ask you to drop those in the chat. We're looking for what are all the dimensions of sexuality. I see in the chat a few coming up. Great, keep going. We're going to see if you can get all of the 16 dimensions of sexuality.
So we have emotions, feelings, thoughts, preferences, touch, fantasies, physical attraction.
All great answers, and they're all correct. Okay.
Choice.
A few more minutes. Choice. Great one, especially in a supported decision-making presentation. All right,
Consent,
awesome.
Beliefs.
I love that you put consent in there. Beliefs, religious beliefs, personal beliefs, all important. Great job. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. We're going to give you a little help here because I think you came close to getting most of the 16 dimensions. There we go. So if you look at this slide, what I always talk about are these 16 dimensions of sexuality. And so when I think about the word sex, I know that it refers only to the physical act of intercourse in all its forms. And sexuality refers to that much bigger topic. It's a set of topics that covers many aspects of humanity and our culture, as we mentioned before. And when we think as educators about sexuality, we think of all of these dimensions. Things like in external body parts and internal body parts. And think of just that concept and how we need to really work to teach that concept to people with various types of disabilities, sometimes cognitive disabilities. So just that idea of there's parts of your body that are working parts of your body that you don't see. How do you explain that to a person with a profound impairment? It can be different. I mean, it can be done, but it needs to be done in a different way. So in the past, people with disabilities, some in special education were offered just a general sex ed class. Many were opted out because they were in special ed of those classes. But those who did maybe didn't benefit because the class wasn't structured around their needs and their skill set and their way of learning. So when we teach these topics, we want to make sure that we're teaching all of the 16 dimensions, but also teaching to the audience, teaching in a way that makes sense and is understandable and accessible to everyone in our audience. Then, internal body parts, the function of the body parts, gender and gender identity. So you see from the comments people made earlier, a lot of them fall into these categories. the difference between public and private. And I will tell you, as a longtime sexuality educator, this is one of the main things that gets people into trouble. Sometimes in trouble with the law by not understanding what public and private means. Puberty and aging, emotions and relationships, masturbation and sex, contraception and STIs, pregnancy and infancy, and laws about sexuality. We often don't talk about that and don't teach people with disabilities about the laws that could affect them. Sexual abuse, we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment here. Disability effects on sexuality. I don't know how many times I get asked by small groups that I'm teaching, well, if I have autism, does that mean that if I have children, they'll have autism? Or I have muscular dystrophy, can I bear children? Can I carry children? All of those kind of questions come to us all the time. So it's important that we let people know the things that will affect their lives. Again, you can't ask people to make decisions unless you're educating them about the decisions that you're asking them to make. Sex and the media, and think about how sex is portrayed in the media for people with disabilities versus the general population. Religious values, and when we talk about this, we always say yours, not mine. It's not sexuality educators imposing their own religious values on someone. It's understanding that different religions think about and talk about sexuality in vastly different ways. Ownership of your body is probably the quintessential, the most important of the 16 dimensions of sexuality. If we don't teach people with disabilities to own their body, lots of things can happen. All of them are negative. It's really important to understand sexual self-advocacy, and not just in romantic, potential intimate relationships, but sexual self-advocacy in all your relationships. Things like talking to your direct support staff, who showers you, how you want to be showered, where you want to be touched, whether, what products you want used on your body. All of those things are very important. Whether you want to have a male or a female help bathe you, if that's something that you physically need. All of those are part of sexual self-advocacy. We're going to go on to the next slide. Rachel, this one's yours. Go ahead and unmute. There you go.
This is, what should I say about this?
Well, this is the trigger warning.
This is a trigger warning about, people who have disabilities, who have been sexually assaulted, right?
Yep.
And sexually abused, but take care of you. You can use the private chat function to contact Mary privately if you need to discuss something. She has been working on these issues for over 40 years. There will also be time afterwards to share your thoughts and feelings with the group if you choose if you choose to. It will not be required.
Okay. So we always want to give people a warning before we play the next audio clip. And in this audio clip, it's from the National Public Radio Report on Sexual Abuse and Exploitation of People with Disabilities. And so we know it can be a triggering effect, or it can have a triggering effect on people who have experienced abuse in their past. So if that fits you and your life and things that have been part of your life, then feel free just to mute while we listen to the audio clip. We do, when we're teaching directly to people with disabilities, offer them the opportunity to chat privately with an instructor if they choose to do so during this next clip. Now we can go to the next slide. And while you're looking at those stats, Caitlin will get the audio clip going.
Over the past 2 weeks, we have been reporting on the high rates of sexual assault of people with intellectual disabilities. NPR obtained unpublished federal data and found they are assaulted at more than 7 times the rate as everyone else. This information has been shocking to a lot of us, but it wasn't a surprise to people who have intellectual disabilities. In the final part of our series, NPR's Joseph Shapiro introduces us to some of the women and men who told him their stories. And just a warning, this report talks about sexual violence, and it runs about 7 minutes.
Somebody with an intellectual disability, by definition, has difficulty learning or reasoning or problem solving. But one thing I've learned from my reporting, they often think deeply about the things that affect them, the things that isolate them, like sexual assault.
I felt dirty. I just felt not clean. I blamed myself, and I felt powerless.
Debbie Robinson was in her early 20s when she was raped.
I couldn't even look in the mirror because you see, all that comes back to you. It just does.
When the abuse happened, she couldn't even identify it as rape. She didn't get sex ed in school. The older man who abused her was related to someone who lived in her house. She'd been taught to trust him. She knew she didn't like it, that it was hidden, but she was confused. She thought maybe it was a relationship, a bad one.
I had to figure out that it's not my fault. I had to go through all the memories and name it and open up the box that you really don't want to open up. Pandora's box.
It took a lot of therapy. Finding a therapist who knew how to talk to someone with her disability was hard, and getting there was even harder. Robinson doesn't drive. She confided in a friend who then came every week to give her a ride. Robinson didn't want to tell her overprotective parents, and when she finally did tell her mother, she then had to deal with her mother's own feelings of failure and guilt.
That's why people would get angry, is because we didn't tell our own family members. But here I'm telling a stranger, which is a therapist. You know, that gets our families angry.
There's a wide range of intellectual disability. Some people have significant disabilities, mental and physical. Maybe they can't speak or they need assistance from family or staff for basic things like eating to personal things like being bathed. The vast majority, though, have mild intellectual disability. There's a new generation that grows up and gets better chances in school. Some now even go to college programs. But pretty much everyone with intellectual disabilities has one thing in common. They depend upon other people for assistance, and that puts them at risk.
We are taught to trust grown-ups more than anyone else would be, because when you have a disability, people are always telling you, do as that person says, do as this person says, and all this other stuff.
That's Thomas Mangrum. He says he was a young boy when he was assaulted by a deacon at his church. He told his parents, but they never said anything about it to him again. Mangrum says people with intellectual disabilities just aren't believed.
They think if you got a disability, that means you lie. That you can't really tell the truth, or you don't know what the truth is.
People with intellectual disabilities often do have trouble speaking or describing things in detail or in proper time sequence. Our investigation found that makes it harder for police to investigate and for prosecutors to win these cases in court. But when sexual assaults go unpunished, then perpetrators are free to abuse someone again. It's one reason the NPR numbers show the rate of assault for this population is so high. Thomas Mangrum, who lives in Washington, D.C., thinks it's a matter of bias.
And a lot of us in the disability community, people don't really see us. People don't see us at all. They just see our disability, and that's it.
And yes, sometimes the sexual assault of people with intellectual disabilities does get discounted. In 2014, a judge in Georgia threw out a conviction. He said the woman with Down syndrome didn't behave like a victim. She'd waited a day to report the assault. And in 2012, a psychologist testifying in Los Angeles said a 9-year-old girl who'd been assaulted by a boy at school was likely protected against the emotional trauma because of her low IQ. The jury was so offended, it awarded the girl $1.4 million in damages, far more than the family was even seeking. That kind of thinking, that people with intellectual disabilities suffer less, gets Carolyn Morgan of Philadelphia angry. She says, we feel the same pain as everyone else.
We do feel pain all the time. Yes. Don't tell me that it'll go away.
She knows she's dealt with the pain of her own rape. And she says anyone who denies her pain is ignorant.
They can't see that. They don't want to see it. They close their eyes to it, close their mind to it.
Almost none of the people we interviewed said they were in a relationship now. They said it's especially hard for them, after being assaulted, to figure out what's a healthy relationship and then to have one. Sam Maxwell from Pennsylvania says he didn't know if he could trust anybody.
It took a long, long time before I had a relationship because I don't know if I could trust anybody.
Now Maxwell travels around Western Pennsylvania telling other people his story. He was abused in 2004 at a state institution by a staff member. The man bought him sodas and candy at the canteen. Maxwell thought the man was his friend until the day he took him into the basement at the institution and raped him. Recently, Maxwell told that story to a group of people with intellectual disabilities. 9 of the 15 in the room raised their hands and volunteered their own stories of assault. James Metters was assaulted by a man from his church in Baton Rouge who befriended him. Metters was afraid what would happen if he reported it.
And I thought he was going to kill me.
But a coworker noticed he seemed depressed, got Metters to say what happened, and got him to call the health information line.
And the information line told me to go to the same hospital. And the same hospital is the sexual assault nurse examiner. And I met a wonderful lady named Miss Wanda. And Miss Wanda really took the time to examine me. And the key of it was that she worked with my pace, not her pace. And the police came and did step by step.
In the hospital, Metters was thinking he didn't want anyone else with an intellectual disability to go through this.
And I remember early on during the exam, I said, I want to change the world. But Miss Wanda and the detective and a friend of mine said, James, you need to take time to recover before you help others.
That was 2005. The man who assaulted him went to prison, and Metters started speaking out to groups around the country. He lives in San Antonio now, and 4 times a year, he helps train the new volunteers at the local rape crisis center. He tells them that people with intellectual disabilities are the frequent targets of sexual assault, and he says it's time to stop keeping it a secret. Joseph Shapiro, NPR News.
Thank you for playing that, Caitlin. I greatly appreciate that. So let's talk a little bit about statistics, because this is reality in everyday life for people with disabilities. Depending on the study, research shows people with disabilities are anywhere from 4 to 10 times more likely to experience sexual abuse in their lifetime than the general population. Most people, then, when they present, kind of cut that difference between the 4 and 10 and say 7 times more likely. There is no study that I've seen or found in the last 40 years of my career that says people with disabilities are less likely to be abused. So we know that they are more. Every study, one by one, indicates they're more likely. And depending on the actual research base that they're using, it could be 4 to 10 times more likely. Some studies show that 1 in every 4 people with disabilities has been sexually abused in their lifetime, most of which it's happened even 10 times or more. So studies depending on, research depending on what exactly they were studying can seem like they vary. But the point being that people with disabilities are far more likely to experience this than the general population. According to that National Public Radio NPR report in 2017, it showed that an estimated 72% of rapes are committed by someone a victim knows, but for women with disabilities, that percent is even higher. For victims with disabilities, the rapist is known to them 86% of the time. So when we talk about myths and stereotypes that the general population harbors about people with disabilities, think about that in conjunction as it intersects with this topic of sexuality. If you harbor the myth or stereotype that a person with a disability is childlike, and you teach sexuality only based on what you would teach to a child, maybe, say stranger danger, what have we really done? Not only have we not helped them, but we've harmed them because we haven't alerted them to understand a healthy versus an unhealthy relationship, even in relationships that they're not thinking about as intimate. Think of the number of people on that audio clip that talked about being abused by someone in their environment, somebody they were known, that was known to them, and someone, in some cases, that was paid to provide support to them. This is the more likely experience for people with disabilities. So it's really important that we dig through those myths and stereotypes, and we teach not just about sex, but also about sexuality and how to identify those differences between healthy and unhealthy relationships. And think about these statistics in terms of guardianship. If we have guardians that harbor those myths and stereotypes, are they really do justice to the wards that they're there to support? When the mental health code talks about the responsibilities of guardianship being to provide a safe place to live and a safe environment for people with disabilities to live in, but yet then to deny them education on how to stay safe really doesn't make any sense. So let's go on to the next slide. We're going to talk about the risk factors here. Before we get started, though, I want to give people a few moments to just, what were your thoughts when you heard that audio clip? And we'll have you write those in the chat. I've listened to that what seems like 1,000 times. And every time I sort of take another little piece of it and it kind of resonates with me. But what did you think as an audience when you heard that audio clip?
So we have someone in the chat that said heartbreaking.
It definitely can be heartbreaking. I think one of the things that resonated this time to me is, and I've thought about it other times when I've heard it as well, is how many of those situations of abuse or neglect were brought up by somebody outside of the professional people that worked with the individual. I've seen situations where even a cab driver has brought to the attention of the professionals working with an individual that they don't seem to be themselves. Look, I'm just their cab driver. I drive them to work every day and they don't seem to be themselves. I think, somebody needs to investigate that. And so, it's kind of a case for community inclusion. And the more people that an individual with a disability meets and befriends and builds social capital with in the community, the more people there are looking out for them. So what kind of comments did people make in the chat there, Caitlin?
A lot of people said sad, upset, angry. Someone was surprised by the numbers. Someone said horrible. And there's also a comment that says we do a disservice by not training professionals across disciplines to know and recognize this.
Absolutely. We tend to think as professionals to look at what are the signs of experience abuse, or, we think about ACEs, those early life experiences. But imagine with those statistics, the number of people that you've worked with throughout your career that have experiences and no one knows. It's never been brought up. It's never been reported. But yet most of us in the room are probably mandatory reporters. Anybody that's work is governed by the mental health code is a mandatory reporter. So we'll talk a little bit more about those things shortly. So thanks for all those comments. Rachel, we are now on slide 12. Do you want to talk a little bit about the risk factors? I'm not hearing or seeing you actually at this moment, so you might be muted. Are you there, Rachel?
Can you see me?
Yep, now we can. Go ahead.
Oh, the risk factors about having a disability is dependence on others, cultural compliance, misperception of not being credible, needing assistance for daily living, little or no sexuality education, mobility and communication challenges, history of negative health care or legal experiences, and mental myths and stereotypes.
So we've heard directly from people with disabilities who have experienced abuse. And these are the things that put them at higher risk. Think for a moment of how this connects to this issue of guardianship. If you are declared legally incapacitated by a court and treated as though you're not able to make decisions about something that's a key aspect of humanity in our lives, as we talked about earlier with Maslow's hierarchy, it appears in each level of Maslow's hierarchy. So that importance of connecting with other human beings, and including connecting in an intimate way. I mean, that's a big part of anyone's life. So if we harbor those myths and stereotypes, we are really putting people more at risk. So this dependence on others, unless we teach people from a very early age to make independent decisions and to weigh all their options and be educated about the decisions they make, we put them at risk. If we teach a culture of compliance, just listen to the staff, listen to your parents, listen to your elders. If that's the only message people receive early on, they don't know that they can say no. They don't then identify if a staff is abusing them because they just think that's what they're supposed to do. And this misrepresentation of not being credible, I mean, think about that lawsuit in California. Not only did the court say, no, this person with a disability has experienced harm the way anyone else who was sexually abused would, they awarded them way more than the lawyers were even asking for. And I will tell you, in the other case where a psychologist said somebody was buffered basically by having a disability and didn't really experience the abuse, that psychologist was sanctioned by the national organization that they were a member of, because that's so incorrect. People with disabilities experience abuse and the trauma of abuse the same way other people do. We just don't often hear about it. I was thrilled when we heard that, NPR was doing a series, but I would like to have heard that much earlier on. And I think, we're happy to see this trend, but there are some dangers in it. We'll talk about that in a minute. And this issue of little or no sexuality just really needs to be changed. A lot of people have fear that, if we teach about sexuality, they hear it as we're teaching about sex only, and everyone's going to run out and have sex. And what we see from research, the reality is that's so not true. What is true is that the more sexuality education anyone gets, the more likely they are to have a later on sex of their first sexual encounter, the less likely they are to experience an STI or an STD, and the more likely they are to be able to protect themselves and identify a healthy versus an unhealthy relationship. So that very fear that people claim is really just the opposite. The more education people get, the less likely the danger is to them. Let's move on to the next slide there. So I mentioned briefly about this danger in the trend. And while I'm thrilled that, this is a topic that's talked a lot about since about 2017, particularly here in Michigan, when we experienced all that happened then. In 2017, our national organization, the National Association of Councils on Developmental Disabilities, put out a 19-page policy brief, and it kind of ended with every council being asked, what are you doing about this? And then we had the NPR series come out around that time. And then the third thing we had come out was the Nasser Scandal here in Michigan. And for me in Lansing, it was really difficult not to have that right in my face every morning. The courthouse where the Ingham County case occurred is literally kitty corner from the building where I work. So every morning I had to drive in and out, weaving in and out of, news vehicles who were all there to cover that case. So again, the danger I see in this trend is, wow, it's so great that this is at the forefront of our minds, but why does it take it happening to a national athlete before it gets there, when it's been happening for years to people with disabilities? And unless we start to think more about that and what to do about it, it will continue. So we really, all of those things happening really made the council think we need to create an initiative to really help decrease this. And a piece of this is working with guardians as well for them to understand the importance of getting sexuality education for everybody that is one of their wards, particularly public guardians who don't have that familial relationship with their wards. Let's go ahead to the next slide, Caitlin. Rachel, go ahead. We're on slide 14.
Sexuality education's curriculums in Michigan schools, guidelines for guest speakers, resources for special education's sexuality education, implementing sexual education in Michigan schools, A, Michigan Department of Education, and B, regional school health coordinators.
So you might be asking yourself at this point, so what do we do about it? What is, people, working at CMHs or family members that might be on this call? There's a lot of resources available here in Michigan. They're available to you as professionals, they're available to families, they're available to guardians. Let's go on to the next slide and talk a little bit about these handouts. Now, all of these handouts were sent to Vicki and Caitlin. So when they put the PowerPoint up to the website, we would encourage them to also link to these handouts that you'll have access to these. This first handout that Rachel mentioned is regional health coordinators. So in every location in the state, every region, there are school health coordinators that can help a school district work to get a quality education. One not based on myths and stereotypes, but one based on fact and all of the 16 dimensions of sexuality. The middle handout, we're just showing them to you here. We recognize you probably can't read them on the screen, depending on the size of the device that you're using. So we're providing these as handouts that you can get on the website with the PowerPoint. This next one talks about the rules regarding sexuality education in public schools. Because remember, every person with a disability goes through school for a period of time in Michigan that can be up to the age of 26. And that's a really formidable time to provide education based on where they're at that, that developmental stage that they're at. But these are the rules about providing that education in schools. The third handout here is about guest speakers. So you might be wondering, the presentation that we provide, the curriculum that we as a council provides is 22 lessons. It covers each of the 16 dimensions of sexuality. How do you get that into a school district? Well, there's a process. And it's something that you as people working in the CMH realm and you as family members and you as people with developmental disabilities can get involved in. You can get involved in the ISD SABE committee at your local district. And understand that if you're a CMH and you're providing a sexuality education outside of a school district, outside of the school day, and outside of a school building, these rules don't apply. You can teach whatever curriculum you feel is appropriate. We're going to talk about the council's curriculum in a little bit and talk about why we chose that particular curriculum. But for now, we're going to go on to some more information that you also receive as handouts. Okay. This one is laws pertaining to sexuality and mandatory reporting. As I mentioned earlier, you are all mandatory reporters. So if you work under the mental health code. And so it's important to understand that process. It's important because many of the people that you work with, when we talk about trauma-informed care, think back to those statistics. It's really important to provide supports and services in a trauma-informed way because many of the people that we've worked with over the years have experienced that. So this again is a handout that you can receive. It's a multi-page handout and it goes through that whole mandatory reporting process. So we wanted you to have access to that. Go ahead to slide 17. And Rachel, this one's still mine. Information from pediatricians. So if you're working with family members or individuals who say, you know, I don't really want you to think about this, or you're at somebody's person-centered plan and the guardian says, no, I don't really want them learning about sexuality because then they're going to run out and have sex. All research shows that it's critically important for people to have education. And so here's some studies that you can show them, you know, where the science says this is what's actually happening. And it's talking about providing information about healthy relationship for children and adolescents with disabilities and how critical it is. So again, more tools you can put in your toolbox when you're having conversations with others about this. And Caitlin's putting those, I believe, into the chat, or she's going to talk at the end about how to locate these on the website. Rachel, do you want to talk a little bit about this one, Guardianship and Consent, which is slide 18?
This is the laws pertaining to sexuality and guardianship. This is another handout you can print out or read all about, and in this handout is about guardianship and consent, and the myths and facts about consent and guardianship.
Okay. Is it all right with you, Rachel, if I just talk about it for a moment?
Yeah, I can't see the words though.
Yep. So the handout, again, we know you're not able to read them in this small print as they appear, but we want you to be able to identify which one you're looking for when you access the handouts. So guardianship consent starts with myths. A person who has a guardian cannot access sexuality skills education or consent to sexual activities without approval from their guardian. Support team members should defer to the guardian for all sexually related decision making. So think about that. That's a myth. We often think, oh, a guardian can say they're not able to get any education, but that is a myth. We do encourage that guardianships are brought into that discussion, and guardians are reminded of their responsibility for people to be able to access education. In fact, in response to the larger question about consent, capacity, and the rights of people with disabilities, the American Association of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities is a really great resource for you. On their website, they explain every person has the right to exercise choices regarding sexual expression and social relationships. The presence of an intellectual or developmental disability, regardless of severity, does not in itself identify or justify loss of rights related to sexuality. And again, that's AAIDD policy, a position statement. So again, these are really good resources that you can use in having conversations with others. This one handout also goes on to talk about what the National Guardianship Association and their standards of practice and what they state. And in that document, it says the guardian shall ensure that the ward has information about and access to accommodations necessary to permit sexual expression to the extent that the ward desires and to the extent that the ward possesses the capacity to consent to specific activity. And that's from Assessment of Sexual Consent Capacity by Martin. The research was done in 2007. And what do self-advocates say about this? What they said in this document that's provided here is we are sexual beings. We are interested in knowing how to express our sexuality in safe and healthy ways. We want to have relationships of our own choosing in our own time frame and shaped by our own values. So think about that for a minute. Isn't that a statement that any of us would want to say about ourselves? You know, I think back to any of us who were maybe pressured by a parent to, you know, like somebody that they felt was, you know, a good partner for us, but maybe we didn't really just, you know, have those feelings toward that individual. What people with disabilities are saying or what we're all saying. We want a healthy relationship of our own choosing. And really, even a person under guardianship, we need to think about this fact that guardians tend to think they have much more control than they do. So even in a situation where a guardian says, you can't spend time with this person, I don't think this person is a good influence on you. What we typically see happening in those situations is that the person does it anyways. If a guardian thinks they can control it, they're really kind of misinformed, because unless that guardian wants to follow a person around 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, how can they stop it? And again, what typically happens is a dangerous situation is set up. If two people want to be together, they will find a way to be together. If it's not supported, if they're not educated on how to be together in the safest possible ways, we see that they get together in unsafe ways, meeting up in a gas station bathroom. That's really not hygienic at all. And oftentimes without any type of contraception or protection. And maybe they don't even want to have a child. And they certainly don't want to get an STI or an STD, but yet they weren't provided that education. So again, that need for belonging and affection and sexual intimacy is inherent in all human beings. So when we have guardians kind of intercede in that, it often creates a more dangerous situation rather than a less dangerous situation. So if we could go ahead and go on to the next slide, please. We have a comment in the chat. I just heard it beep. So if you want to go ahead and read that, Caitlin.
Yep, it was just someone's comment back to your comment about having, you know, going to a gas station bathroom.
Yeah, not the most hygienic place, for sure. So what is our mission for our sexuality education initiative? Again, I started with the council in about 2017, and having been a longtime sexuality educator. In fact, before I worked for the council, I contracted to do presentations for them on this topic to family groups. But the big takeaway we want you to get from this and from our initiative is that it's so critical to be proactive instead of reactive when teaching. As a psychologist, as I said early on in my professional career, many times I got referrals and it was people reacting to a negative situation. There was an unwanted pregnancy. There was an STI or an STD, detected. There was somebody involved with the legal system. And then proactively people think, oh, we need to provide some education so this doesn't keep happening. Rather than being, proactive and thinking ahead of time, wow, every human being needs to have good quality sexuality education. Every human being needs to be able to identify the difference between a healthy and an unhealthy relationship. So if they are being groomed for sexual abuse by a person, whether it's a person they know, a person that works for them, or a person in their family, they can identify that. And they know that they can report and they know how to report. Those are critical things that we're just missing from what happens in our system today, particularly for individuals who have public guardians. So what we see now is our mission is to change the way the system's working now. The way it has worked, people have lost jobs because they had no education. People have lost housing because they had no education. People can battle with the legal system for years. People can struggle to identify what a healthy relationship even is. You heard from some of the individuals on the NPR audio clip how, they just struggle to even be in a relationship after they've experienced that type of abuse. And people can spend a lifetime dealing with that trauma. So it's really critical that we work against that continuing to happen. Next slide, please, Caitlin. So the Michigan Developmental Disabilities Council initiative was created in 2017, shortly after I came to the council. And it was based, as I said before, on 3 things happening that year. So when I was first interviewed, they were aware that I taught about sexuality education. As I mentioned, I contracted with the council to do those presentations prior to that. But it wasn't part of that 5-year plan. And then it was just brought right into our faces. We had the NPR report, the NACDD council brief, and then we had the Nasser Scandal, as I said, happening right outside our windows. 2 parts of the initiative that we created were really important. We wanted to get instructors trained here in Michigan that could provide a quality education. And we wanted those people that we educated to also have follow-up. We wanted it to be sustainable. And so we partnered with Catherine McLaughlin from Elevatus Training to provide teams of individuals in Michigan, the education, the curriculum, and all the materials to provide education based on those 16 dimensions of sexuality. We have some other states that are looking to actually replicate that the work that we're doing here in Michigan. And we're going to talk more about that curriculum in just a moment here. We want you to know before we go into the curriculum that we provide that we don't want to say that that's the only curriculum out there. So in this next slide, if you would go to that, Caitlin. Rachel's going to share a little bit about this document on slide 21 that you see. Again, it's available in large print in the handouts. Rachel, go ahead.
This is a handout for other curriculum resources for students with intellectual disability or developmental disability. And this handout is in the packet you have access to with the PowerPoint.
All right. So I often get questions about this, like this particular curriculum that's listed in this handout. What do you think about it? Feel free, I'm going to share my email later and the last slide. So if you do have questions and you want to know before your agency maybe spends money on getting an expensive curriculum, which ones make sense to you, might be what you're looking at, feel free to call me. I'm familiar with all of the different curriculums that are listed in this handout. And I will also put you in touch with team members that are peer educators, and they have opportunities to kind of share their thoughts about what they got or didn't get from particular curriculums from time to time. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. So while there's a lot of different curriculums available, we chose to use the Elevatus training curriculum, and I'm going to tell you why. So when I was looking at, and I had been asked for years to develop a curriculum, kind of putting together all of the things that I did to talk about the 16 dimensions of sexuality that were specific to people with disabilities, I just haven't found the time to do that with my multiple jobs. I wanted to think when I was looking and evaluating curriculums, if I were going to write a curriculum, what would I want it to be like? And I have to tell you, this is what I'd like it to be like. Part of the reason is that Catherine paired up with people with disabilities from beginning to end. So people with disabilities helped to create the curriculum, people with disabilities helped to vet the curriculum, and people with disabilities helped to teach the curriculum. So that nothing about me without me approach was something that really resonated with me. The curriculum was designed and field tested with self-advocates, again, taking that nothing about me without me approach. It was revised and it will be continually revised. It was revised in 2018. It is trauma-informed and evidence-based. And in the handouts that you will have available, you can also see what the vetting process was. Okay, next slide, please. Go ahead, Rachel. You're on mute, Rachel.
Somebody got kicked out of this
Okay, so it
the
looks like they're
second
back
page.
in now. We can get you
Yeah.
caught up, Tracy, in a little bit. Go ahead, Rachel, with slide number 23.
Okay. These are the Elevatis products and workshops. Becoming a sexuality educator and trainer. 3-day training. In-service training, live and online. Online workshops and trainings. Workshop available right here in Michigan. And for more information, visit www.elevatistraining.com.
And there's also some free materials on the website that you or family members can access if they want to do some sort of one-to-one conversations and education with somebody, you know, that's a family member. Guardians could sign on and get a workshop materials that they could use with individuals. So whether it's individual or group, it's really important to have quality education. Anything else you want to say about Elevatis before we move on, Rachel?
Oh, I personally like this, the Elevatis training because, they make it the educator like me could understand and like understand the different subjects, and it's a much easier way for me to teach other people too.
Yeah, it is a really nice curriculum, and we'll talk in a moment about how that curriculum can be available to all of you as well. Let's go on to the next slide. So this shows a map of Michigan. And the pins that are in black on the map show the first 11 teams that we trained in Michigan. So in 2018, we brought Catherine McLaughlin in, as well as a self-advocate from Minnesota that had been previously trained to use the curriculum. And we were able to field 11 teams, and you see the areas of the state where those 11 teams were from. And when I talk about a team could be 2 people, it could be 10 people. It just depends on how organizations came together. We really recommend that when you get a CMH in a local area and advocacy organizations like an ARC or a CIL and the ISD all working together, and you have members on the team from all of those resources, that's when you really can create a sustainable team and a sustainable education for people with disabilities in a particular area. We weren't happy that we could only get 11 teams, and we really wanted to, you know, build on that and keep this sustainable throughout Michigan. So we then brought Catherine back in late 2018, late 2019, early 2020. And we moved the training to, that was back before COVID when we did things in person. We moved the training to Gaylord so it would be easier access for some of the areas of the northern lower peninsula and the upper peninsula to attend. And we were able to field now 26 teams of individuals covering where you see all of those pins. And our focus is really kind of to collaborate with as many organizations as possible to keep education going. Whatever curriculum is chosen, as long as it's a comprehensive curriculum that covers all of those 16 dimensions, because we think that's really, really critical. We are now working with Elevatis training. Rachel was saying to me in a previous meeting, she really likes the new curriculum that's been brought out. That's 12 lessons designed specifically for identifying healthy relationships and creating healthy relationships in the workplace. And so Elevatis paired up, she's given the thumbs up there. Elevatis paired up with Project Search to take portions of their 22 lesson curriculum and kind of create a shorter series that people with disabilities can kind of use to help them understand the difference between relationships in a work environment. Because what we were seeing from vocational staff is that again and again and again, people were losing jobs. As we mentioned earlier, that intersection of sexuality and other aspects of a person's life. They were losing jobs not because they didn't know how to do the job, but they were losing jobs because they didn't know how to relate to their coworkers. And they were creating situations where they were either being sexually harassed at work or they were sexually harassing others and not even understanding that that's what was going on. So that's another piece that we like, is that as the need arises and things come to the forefront, they reevaluate and add to their curriculum, which is really nice. Let's go on to that next slide, and then we're going to save some time for questions at the end. Rachel, slide 25.
Oh, what do I say about it?
Whatever you want.
Okay. Can I say what Frank and Bonnie said?
Absolutely.
Okay. This is from Bonnie Gonzalez, and she said, I have shared topics from this curriculum with people with disabilities and others without disabilities. This message is universal to all because too often people have not had the opportunity for proper sexuality education regardless of disabilities or not. So that was with Bonnie.
And Bonnie serves on the Muskegon team of, she's a peer educator on the Muskegon team.
Oh,
go ahead, Rachel.
And Frank Vaca, who's a central team educator, said it's so empowering to be able to reach out to your own community and inform.
So think about those two statements made by people with disabilities right here in Michigan who have gained not only education themselves, but are now helping to educate others, and how that helps them in decision-making and other aspects of their lives. And teaching sexual self-advocacy is huge in helping people to learn to be more assertive and advocate in other aspects of their life. It all intersects and there's carryover. Do you want to go through the numbers? And I will tell you, Rachel, every time we do this, I have to remember to update these. So go ahead and tell them the numbers as of the time this presentation was created, and then I'll update them.
Okay, who is being reached by this initiative? Since the 2018 team training, 35 individuals with I or DD were trained as sexuality educators. 70 professionals and parents were trained as sexuality educators too. Since the 2018 summit, there's 240 family members, 139 transition staff, 502 other agencies, and 652 individuals with intellectual or developmental disability.
Thanks, Rachel. So when we created this presentation months ago and started working on it, those were the numbers. But I'm happy to tell you, as of today, over 1,000 individuals in Michigan have received education based on this curriculum. And all of the other numbers are higher as well. Again, we talked about early spring when Rachel attended and became a sexuality educator herself. So we now have nearly 50 individuals with IDD that are peer educators. We have 90-some professionals and parents who are trained as sexuality educators working in different areas of the state, and all have access to, we know what's a comprehensive curriculum, as well as resources and follow-up from the council in order to go back to their local area and continue to provide education. So every month, even in the midst of, the coronavirus pandemic, people have been able to kind of switch gears and provide training virtually. We've had some situations where we'll get a call from a prosecuting attorney saying, here's a situation that's happened. If you can help us identify where a person can get some education, we can avoid jail time, because we don't think they knowingly committed a crime. We think they need education versus jail time. And we can help keep them off the sex offenders registry by verifying for the judge that they've received some education. So in one situation, I was able to call upon a team member who's also works in private practice as a social worker.
I received a voice message on my phone. I have no point.
Sorry, somebody's background came. So in that situation, this gentleman lived in a group home. He wasn't able to access technology or the internet at all. So we were able to do it over the phone, working with the individual. That counselor and therapist has met with him in person now a couple of times toward the end of more recent 6 months or so, but throughout COVID was providing education, and he was receiving information from all the 22 lessons. And that's how the teams have really worked together. And we really encourage you, whatever area you're in the state, to get a team trained and to, collaborate with us so we can help you sustain that team over time. Caitlin, if you want to go ahead to the next slide, it is 221. I will just let you know that both Rachel and I are happy to be contacted. You have one set of information on there. So if you have questions particular to Rachel, and we're going to have time here for a little bit, for about 10 minutes, to actually go over questions that you have now. But if sometimes, when you're in a training, you think, oh, I wish I would have asked this after you leave. Feel free to email me. If the question is for me, I will answer it. If the question is for Rachel, I will forward it to her and get you her response. So we want to open it up right now for questions. Caitlin, are you comfortable with people just unmuting and asking questions, or do you want them in the chat?
It is totally up to what everyone wants to do. If we have, a lot of people that want to unmute, I'd prefer if you use the raise your hand feature just so we can call on everyone. Or you can put that in the chat. Totally up to everyone else what they want to do.
Okay. So go ahead with questions that you have at this time. I see that they've also put in the chat the elevatedstraining.com. Thank you.
Mary, while we're waiting for people to come up with their questions, put them in the chat or such, could you and Rachel just say what's the one big thing you really want people to take away from the training?
For me, and then I'll have Rachel answer as well. For me, the one big thing that I want people to take away from the training is that all human beings are sexual human beings, and they need to be empowered to make decisions about their sexuality, to make decisions about relationships. If they're not empowered to do that, if they're not educated on the difference between a healthy and unhealthy relationship, we've put them in danger. So regardless of whether somebody is an autonomous adult or whether they have a guardian, it's still that they receive education. Rachel, do you have any comments about that?
I just want people to take away that we as people with disabilities, well, me, because I'm a person with a disability, I sometimes feel like I don't have rights that other people do, and by being a student of this course, I feel like I am now empowered to say it's not your body, it's my body, and I get to decide what is right for me. And I feel like it's really important for people to be with disabilities to to like know that it's okay to have your own thoughts and your own feelings and it's okay to be to have trainings like this as a part of life. And
Rachel, is your mom there with you right now?
yeah.
All right. I'm kind of putting you on the spot, Debbie. Do you want to say some thoughts about, because you've had more than one child kind of go through sexuality education. What are your thoughts as a parent? I think it might be nice for the audience to hear if you don't mind.
Yay, mommy.
I have two children with disabilities. It was very eye-opening for me what one of my children took away from this teaching program with sexuality that the other one didn't. But they both learned so much and they were so excited to share. I gave them their space, their time. I'm supporting Rachel right now because she's in a teaching mode. But when they were taking the class, I put myself out of their private time and area while they were learning, and they always wanted to share what they learned, which I'm very happy that they wanted to do that. But as a parent would ask them questions more specific, it was very interesting as a parent to see what one of my kids took away versus another. So if you have no training or no experience or no learning at all, and if you just, out of the 22 weeks, if you just get one huge portion, that's an accomplishment. You know, that's huge. You know, that's what I took away. And I had been, I really didn't know what direction to go, but I was thrilled when I heard that my two kids would have the opportunity to learn this, because I did not feel that they got that type of education or learning in school, and I really didn't know where to go to get that depth and detailed and teaching where they would understand it, if that makes sense. So I was thrilled to know that this learning experience, teaching experience was available to them.
Thank you so much. I know that kind of put you on the spot. You weren't expecting to speak today, but it's always helpful for people to hear that family, that parent perspective as well. A lot of families fear that, you know, when somebody gets education, it's going to be, you know, kind of a separation between them and their young adult. And it's really just the opposite. It gives opportunities to talk together. It gives opportunities to bring the topic up in a very responsible way. So thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. Any other questions, Caitlin? We've got a couple minutes left here.
No other questions in the chat at this time.
Okay. Vicki, do you want to go ahead and do your wind up then?
Yep, quick wind up. Did somebody put their hand up recently? Somebody does have their hand up now.
Yep, somebody just put their hand up. So if you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask that question, go ahead. We'll give you just a moment to do that.
Hello, thank you for this presentation. It's so good and so timely for my family, because my son, who is now out of the public education system for many years, is now we are dealing with this. He had in school, he was told that he at his level of intellectual disability, he has autism and intellectual disability, that he will never be able to realize his sexuality. When I approached the psychologist and the teachers there as to how we could teach him. So I hired somebody privately, and this was I want to say about 25 years ago, 25, 30, in the mid 90s. Wonderful tutor, but the only thing she was able to teach him was what is appropriate and inappropriate behavior, what is public and private behavior, which he understands. But beyond that, he has interest in girls, but he's never been able to go on a date. His high school prom or prom he went with his sister. So this was, and now we don't know how to teach him because it's causing him a lot of anxiety, a lot of frustration. So thank you for this presentation. And I wanted to ask, in our own network, do we have trainers or educators, and where we should get this kind of support for our family members?
What I'm going to ask you to do is look at the last slide is, I'm sorry, we have another slide up that says questions. Caitlin, can you drop my email into the chat box? Or there you go. Or you could put it right up on the screen. So email me and I can talk specifically about people in the Oakland County area. I'm assuming that's where you're from. Oakland and Wayne County area. We do have teams in those areas and we can hook you up with a conversation with them. And there are also some private therapists that work in your area that are also trained on the curriculum. So we're happy to share that information. I'm happy to help pair you up with people that can support you and your family.
Thank you very much. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hans. All right, we're about done. I really appreciate the presentation as well. I think for me, the risk factors, even though I kind of was aware of those, but bringing that all together and the risk factors for individuals, and then of course the disheartening data about sexual abuse was also an eye opener. So thank you so much for the presentation. Very much appreciate it, Rachel and Mary. Reminder that if you want social work CEUs, you do have to complete the survey that has been put in the chat. The link is in the chat. Please complete that. Even if you don't need CEUs, please complete the survey. It helps us with future trainings. Next slide. As I mentioned, this is a 10-month series. We're finishing it up in October. So our last session in October will be how peers can support individuals with supported decision-making and help them have the most independent life that they would like to have. And Mary, I do think there are, like Rachel, there are some peers who are trained in the curriculum. Is that correct?
Absolutely. There are some peer mentors located in Wayne Community Mental Health or Integrated Health Network, I think they call it now, that are trained in the curriculum, as well as some self-advocates and professionals from organizations in that area as well.
Great. Thank you. So join us in October. A reminder, we have recorded this session. And if we go to the next slide, I'll tell you where the recordings are on our website. So there you go. If you go to our website at oaklandchn.org, you click on training, recorded training, and you drop down to the supported decision-making series. You'll see all of our trainings there. This September training will be there in about a week or two. We have to do a little bit of magic with it before we put it up. We also will be presenting this again this evening at 6 p.m. If you know of someone who has interest, who didn't sign up, who forgot, who you just want to say, hey, you better watch this, feel free to email Mary or myself or Caitlin, and we're happy to send them the link on how to join us at 6 o'clock this evening. Next slide. Thank you again for attending our training. I'm trying to go fast because I know we're up with time. Thanks again for joining us. Please complete the survey. We hope to see you at our training in October. Take care, everybody.